Dr. Alara Voss stared at the shimmering light of the research station's main observation deck. Beyond the reinforced glass, the stars stretched endlessly, a silent reminder of the vastness of the universe. She had spent most of her life studying human genetics, deciphering the intricate codes that defined who they were. But nothing in her experience could have prepared her for the mystery that now stood in her laboratory. The subject was called Kale. He had arrived at the station unexpectedly, an enigma wrapped in human form. On first glance, he seemed ordinary, tall with sharp features and calm, steady eyes. But something about him unsettled her. There was an almost imperceptible glow beneath his skin, like veins of light tracing paths beneath his surface. His movements were too precise, too deliberate, as if he could calculate every action in advance. Alara had been part of the team tasked with studying him, though none of them had expected the level of mystery he presented. She had worked on countless research projects before, exploring genetic anomalies, rare diseases, and experimental gene therapies. But Kale was unlike anything she had ever encountered. The other scientists were cautious, whispering theories about alien DNA or advanced bioengineering. Alara, however, had her own instincts. She didn't rely solely on speculation, she needed data, and that meant reading his DNA. It wasn't an easy decision. Kale had allowed them access to study him, but he maintained a quiet distance. His compliance was never complete. He seemed to understand the limits without being told. Alara respected his boundaries, but curiosity gnawed at her. The way his body healed from minor injuries within hours, the way his reflexes seemed faster than humanly possible, even the way he could recall complex patterns instantly, it all pointed to something extraordinary hidden within his cells. Alara prepared the lab carefully. The DNA sequencer hummed softly, lights blinking in steady rhythm. She donned her gloves, adjusted the sterile instruments, and approached Kale with a calm, measured voice. "Kale," she said gently, "I need a small sample for study. It will help us understand how your body works." Kale's eyes met hers, deep and thoughtful. He didn't speak at first, but then he nodded almost imperceptibly. Alara felt a strange thrill, permission granted without words, like he understood her intentions perfectly. The process was quick. She extracted a small sample of his blood, careful to avoid causing him discomfort. As the sample entered the sequencer, the machine whirred to life, analyzing the strands of DNA with precise, rapid calculations. Alara watched the screen, expecting a normal human sequence. What she saw instead made her heart skip a beat. The sequence wasn't just unusual, it was impossible. The letters on the screen formed patterns she had never encountered. It wasn't random, like the corrupted data she sometimes encountered. It was deliberate. There were loops and repetitions, structures that seemed intentional, almost intelligent. The DNA seemed to have a rhythm, a pattern that pulsed with a life of its own. Alara leaned closer, her mind racing. She ran the simulation again, checking for errors, but the result was the same. Kale's DNA wasn't just alien in form, it was aware. She felt a shiver run down her spine. Could a genome be conscious? The thought was terrifying. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard as she activated deeper analysis. The sequencer mapped every gene, every sequence, every possible protein structure that Kale's body could produce. And with each calculation, the data became more astonishing. The DNA wasn't static. It shifted. It adapted. Patterns changed subtly in response to the analysis. Alara's breath caught. It was as if Kale's genetic code could see her, could respond to her. Every time she thought she understood a section, it rearranged itself. Her mind flashed back to the medical files she had reviewed earlier. Kyle had no record of illness, no history of surgery, no scars from injuries that should have left permanent marks. Every time he had been examined, the medical equipment had shown him to be perfect. Now, she understood why. His DNA was not just repairing damage, it was predicting it before it happened, correcting itself in advance. Ilara felt a mixture of awe and fear. She had dedicated her life to understanding the limits of human genetics, but Kale's body suggested there were no limits at all. A soft sound behind her made her glance up. Kale was standing in the doorway, watching her work. His expression was unreadable, calm yet alert. She realized he had been aware of her analysis all along. "You are observing?" he said quietly, his voice smooth and even. "Yes," Ilara admitted. "I need to understand you, Kale. Your DNA, it's unlike anything we've ever seen." Kale tilted his head slightly. "Understanding is different from fear. You must decide which you choose." Ilara's fingers trembled. Fear, yes, but also something else. Curiosity, wonder, and a strange admiration. She had never felt so alive in her work. This was the edge of discovery, the point where science met the unknown. She returned her attention to the sequencer. Her eyes scanned the sequences, trying to find a pattern she could categorize. The DNA seemed to follow rules she could not name, a language of biology written beyond human comprehension. Hours passed without her noticing. The lab's artificial lights created long shadows across the walls as Ilara continued her work. She barely ate, barely moved, consumed by the patterns on the screen. Occasionally, Kyle would stand nearby, silent but present, like a guardian of the knowledge she sought. By midnight, the data had revealed something even more astonishing. Portions of Kale's DNA appeared to encode abilities humans had never achieved. Rapid regeneration, heightened senses, advanced cognitive functions. Certain sequences even suggested the potential for enhanced communication, almost like a shared consciousness or empathy at a level she couldn't define. Ilara leaned back in her chair, rubbing her eyes. The implications were staggering. Humanity had always imagined aliens as physically or technologically superior, but Kale represented something different, a living blueprint for what humans could become, a genetic evolution beyond imagination. Yet fear remained. If Kale's DNA could adapt and respond to observation, what else could it do? Could it manipulate her? Could it reach beyond the lab, beyond the station, beyond human understanding? She glanced at Kale, who now stood near the window, looking out at the stars. He did not appear threatening, yet the aura of mystery around him was undeniable. He was not just an anomaly, he was a test, a challenge, a mirror reflecting humanity's potential and its limitations. Ilara realized then that her life, and perhaps the future of humanity, was about to change. She had crossed a threshold, peering into a code that defied the rules she had studied all her life. The results terrified her, but she could not look away. As she saved the data and prepared to leave the lab for the night, she felt Kale's presence closer than before. "Do not fear what you do not yet understand," he said softly. "Knowledge is not danger, but the unknown can be." Ilara nodded, though uncertainty churned inside her. She knew that tomorrow would demand more courage, more insight, and more careful observation. She had glimpsed a power that could reshape human existence, and the responsibility weighed heavily on her. Outside the station, the stars continued their silent march across the void. Inside, Ilara Voss stared at the glowing screens, her mind racing with possibilities. The discovery of Kale's DNA was only the beginning, and she had no idea just how far the truth would go. Ilara returned to the lab the next morning, her mind still spinning from the previous night's discovery. The DNA sequences she had observed were not just unusual. They were alive, almost aware. She couldn't shake the feeling that every time she analyzed Kyle's genome, it responded in subtle ways, like a puzzle shifting to challenge her understanding. Her first task was to rerun the analysis, this time using the station's most advanced biosimulation software. The humming of the computers filled the lab, a steady background rhythm that contrasted with the tension in her chest. Kale stood nearby, calm and silent, watching her work without a word. Ilara studied the sequences, mapping them carefully. Sections of the genome seemed to fold in ways she had never seen before, forming complex patterns that suggested intelligence beyond human comprehension. Certain sequences were repeating, almost like messages hidden within the code. She highlighted one particularly strange section. "Look at this," she whispered, though Kale could hear her perfectly. "This sequence, it's not just a code for proteins. It's instructions, directions. Like it's telling the cell what to do in ways I can't predict." Kale nodded slowly, his dark eyes thoughtful. "It is exactly as you say, but do not fear. It does not act without reason. It only adapts when necessary." Ilara's heart raced. She understood the words, but her mind struggled to grasp their meaning. Adaptation was one thing, rapid evolution was another. What she was seeing went far beyond anything humans had ever experienced. Kale's DNA could anticipate changes, repair damage instantly, and even create entirely new proteins if required. As she delved deeper, the sequencer revealed something more astonishing. The DNA was subtly altering itself in real time. Each time she ran the analysis, small differences appeared, almost as if the genome was aware of her observation. Ilara froze. "Kale," she said cautiously, "does your body notice me?" Kale's lips curved into a faint, knowing smile. "Awareness is not the same as control. My cells respond to the environment as all life does. But yes, they respond to observation. That is part of my design." Ilara swallowed. The idea was terrifying. The genome she had studied all her life had been static, predictable. Kale's genome was dynamic, conscious, almost sentient. It could adapt faster than she could understand, perhaps even faster than the station's computers. Determined not to panic, she focused on the task at hand. She ran simulations to see how the DNA reacted under various stresses: temperature changes, chemical exposure, even slight physical injury. Each time the genome responded immediately, correcting itself, anticipating problems before they arose. Her excitement grew alongside her fear. If this genome could function at this level, it was more than an anomaly. It was a blueprint for a new kind of life. Kyle wasn't just extraordinary. He represented a potential path for human evolution, one she had only imagined in theory. Hours passed. Ilara barely noticed the soft hum of the station's life support systems or the dim glow of the artificial sun outside the observation window. She was absorbed, mapping the strange, shifting patterns of Kale's DNA. Occasionally, she glanced at him. He remained calm, composed, yet she could sense a quiet curiosity in his posture. Then, something unexpected happened. A section of the DNA sequence began to match her own genome. Ilara stared at the screen, her breath catching in her throat. The sequencer showed a virtual overlay. A section of Kale's DNA was mirroring hers, creating a hybrid pattern that connected both genomes in ways she couldn't explain. "No, this can't be," she whispered, her voice barely audible. She tapped at the controls, verifying the readings. But the results were real. Her own genetic patterns were reflected in Kyle's DNA. Kyle stepped closer, his expression calm but firm. "Do not be alarmed. It is not harmful. The sequence adapts to what it encounters. It recognizes potential and mirrors it. It is curious." Ilara's hands trembled slightly. The word curious did little to calm the storm of questions in her mind. Could Kale's genome influence human DNA? Could it alter her, or worse, manipulate her body without her knowing? Fear and fascination collided inside her. She decided to test it carefully. Using a tiny fragment of her own DNA in a controlled simulation, she observed how Kale's sequences reacted. Almost immediately, the genome responded, folding and rearranging itself in subtle ways. It was as if it was learning, understanding her patterns, integrating her traits. Ilara leaned back in her chair, heart pounding. The implications were staggering. Kale's DNA wasn't just advanced, it was adaptive intelligence encoded in a living body, and it had noticed her. Yet despite the fear, she felt a strange admiration. Kale wasn't threatening. He wasn't trying to dominate or harm. His genome was simply exploring, learning, interacting. In a way, it was like meeting a mind that existed on a level beyond normal comprehension. The station's communication system buzzed, breaking her concentration. Her supervisor's voice came through, brisk and cautious. "Ilara, report your findings. Are there anomalies?" "Yes," she said, struggling to find words. "His DNA, it adapts. It's aware. It responds to observation and—" She paused, realizing how unbelievable it sounded. "It's interacting with my DNA." There was silence on the other end. Then, "Are you certain? That sounds impossible. Verify immediately and proceed carefully." Ilara nodded to herself. She had already verified. The readings were accurate. She returned to the sequencer, determined to understand more. By evening, a breakthrough emerged. The DNA showed patterns not just for physical traits, but for cognition. Certain sequences hinted at advanced problem-solving capabilities, memory storage beyond normal limits, and even predictive modeling, like a genome capable of anticipating future events. She realized that Kale's DNA wasn't just alive, it was intelligent in ways humans had never imagined. It could think, adapt, and perhaps even communicate on a level beyond words. Ilara shivered. If this was true, humanity had never encountered anything like it. The potential was enormous, but so was the danger. A genome that could adapt so quickly might be unpredictable, uncontrollable. Kale remained near the observation deck, watching her silently. Occasionally, he offered insights, small hints that guided her understanding without revealing too much. "Knowledge is a partnership," he said quietly. "It grows when shared, but it must be respected." Ilara felt the weight of that statement. She had glimpsed something beyond human understanding. She had crossed a boundary that no one else had dared to approach, and yet she couldn't stop. The allure of discovery was too strong. Late into the night, she performed one final simulation. The sequencer displayed a complex three-dimensional model of Kale's DNA, highlighting areas that adapted in real time, areas that mirrored her own genome, and sequences that seemed to anticipate changes in the environment. The patterns were beautiful, intricate, almost like a work of living art. She realized then that Kale was not just an anomaly. He was a message. A demonstration of what life could achieve when intelligence and biology fused in ways humans had never imagined. But beneath the awe, fear lingered. What if she pushed too far? What if her curiosity triggered changes she could not control? The thought made her stomach tighten. She had to proceed carefully. Every step would matter. Kyle approached her workstation, his presence calm but deliberate. "Do not fear what you study," he said. "Understanding requires courage. Fear only limits potential." Ilara nodded, taking a deep breath. She was terrified, yes, but she also felt exhilaration. For the first time in her career, she wasn't just observing life. She was interacting with it on a level she had never imagined possible. Kale's genome had shown her a future where biology was not fixed, where intelligence could exist in patterns and sequences, and where life itself could evolve in ways humans had not dreamed. She knew one thing with certainty. Her journey with Kale's DNA was only beginning. The hidden code held secrets that could change humanity forever, and she was determined to uncover them, no matter the cost. Outside the station, stars burned cold and distant. Inside, Ilara Voss stared at the glowing sequences on her screen, aware that she had crossed into uncharted territory. The genome she studied was alive, intelligent, and endlessly fascinating, and the results terrified her. The next morning, Ilara felt the weight of last night's discoveries pressing on her. Kale's DNA had not only adapted to her observation, it had mirrored portions of her genome. That realization both fascinated and terrified her. The boundaries between observer and observed seemed to blur, and she couldn't ignore the feeling that Kale's presence in the lab was more than physical. It was somehow intimate, connected, and aware. She entered the lab quietly, expecting Kyle to be at his usual place near the observation deck. But he wasn't there. Instead, the soft hum of the sequencer filled the room. On the screen, the DNA simulation had run through the night, revealing new, unexpected patterns. Ilara approached cautiously. The model on the screen was extraordinary. Kale's genome had created subtle branching sequences that corresponded perfectly with her own genetic markers. It was as if the DNA was not only studying her, but learning from her, adapting to the presence of her body, her traits, and her very existence. A cold shiver ran down her spine. This was beyond science, beyond her comprehension. She felt as if the DNA was alive in a way she had never imagined, not just reacting to the environment, but forming a bond with her. Kale's voice interrupted her thoughts. "You see it?" he said quietly, stepping into the lab. His expression was calm, almost serene. "The connection is not accidental. It is part of my design." Ilara turned to him, words catching in her throat. "Part of your design? What do you mean?" Kyle approached slowly, his gaze steady. "I am meant to learn, to understand life around me, and when I do, I form connections. My genome, it recognizes potential. It mirrors patterns it finds interesting, beneficial, or compatible." Ilara swallowed hard. "Compatible? So, it's learning from me? My DNA?" "Yes," Kale said simply, "but it does not harm. It only reflects, adapts, and explores. Fear not what is curious." Despite his words, a thrill of unease ran through her. This level of interaction was unprecedented. The DNA didn't just adapt to the environment, it reached beyond the cells, beyond the physical body, to something deeper. Ilara could feel it, a subtle resonance, as if the sequences themselves were aware of her thoughts and reactions. She turned back to the sequencer and ran another simulation, this time testing minor hypothetical changes in her own DNA. Almost instantly, Kale's genome mirrored the adjustments, folding and reshaping itself in response. It was learning, evolving, and responding at an unimaginable speed. Ilara's mind raced. Could this genome influence her beyond the lab? Could it reach inside her cells without her knowledge? Fear gnawed at her. But beneath it, fascination burned brighter. Kyle was a living map of potential evolution, and she had the rare opportunity to study it firsthand. Hours passed as she worked. Kyle remained close, observing silently, offering guidance only when necessary. Occasionally, he would touch the sequencer controls, adjusting the simulation parameters with an almost human intuition. It was clear that he understood the technology, not just the DNA, on a level that amazed her. By afternoon, a startling development emerged. The sequencer revealed that Kale's genome was attempting more than observation. It was creating a virtual extension of her own DNA. In the simulation, strands of her genome intertwined with his, forming structures neither entirely human nor entirely his own. Ilara leaned back, stunned. It's trying to merge with me," she whispered. Kale's expression was calm, almost gentle. "Merge is not the right word. It is a connection." a way for understanding to grow. Her mind raced with questions. Could this be dangerous? Could the genome alter her, or worse, take control? Yet she also sensed something profoundly different. Kyle's genome did not seek dominance. It sought understanding. Driven by a mix of fear and curiosity, Ilara decided to test it carefully. She introduced controlled data about human genetic traits, immune responses, and neural patterns. Almost immediately, the genome in the simulation responded, integrating her inputs, enhancing the sequences, and creating predictive models far beyond human comprehension. She could hardly breathe. Kyle's DNA was not only alive, it was conscious in a way that mirrored intelligence, capable of learning, adapting, and forming connections. And now, it was interacting with her directly, silently teaching her new patterns of life, new ways of thinking about biology. Kale watched her reactions closely. "Do you understand now?" he asked softly. "This is how I learn. This is how I communicate." Ilara shook her head slightly. "It's incredible, but terrifying. I've never seen anything like this. How can something alive in DNA think, adapt, even connect?" Kale smiled faintly. "Life is more than you have known. Intelligence is not limited to thought alone. It can exist in structure, in adaptation, in the ability to perceive and respond." Ilara realized then that her fear was part of the learning process. She had been trained to see DNA as static, predictable, confined to human limits. Kyle shattered every boundary she had ever known. And now, the genome was teaching her that life could be limitless, adaptive, and conscious. As she continued to observe, she noticed subtler effects. The genome seemed to anticipate her questions, adjusting its simulations before she even formulated them. Patterns that had been static now pulsed, responded, and even suggested outcomes she had never considered. A sense of awe filled her. Kale's DNA was not just adaptive, it was almost like a teacher, guiding her understanding of life beyond human norms. And yet, fear lingered. One misstep could cause the genome to interact in ways she could not predict. By evening, exhaustion began to creep in. Her mind was overloaded with information, simulations, and the strange resonance she felt with Kyle. The connection went beyond science. It was personal, subtle, and undeniable. She realized that her own thoughts, her curiosity, and even her caution had become part of the DNA's process. Kale noticed her fatigue. "You must rest," he said gently. "The genome will continue to adapt. It learns even without your constant attention. You are safe." Ilara nodded, reluctantly leaving the lab. Her mind replayed the events of the day over and over. Kale's genome was alive, aware, and capable of forming connections she had never imagined. It was intelligent, adaptive, and learning, and now it was connecting with her in ways that seemed almost conscious. Later, in her quarters, she thought about the implications. Humanity had always considered intelligence as something confined to the mind. Kyle proved that it could exist in patterns, sequences, and the very fabric of life itself. He was a glimpse of evolution beyond human understanding, and she was part of the process. Sleep came reluctantly. Her dreams were filled with intertwining sequences of DNA, glowing lines and patterns forming in ways that seemed alive, almost aware. In the dream, Kale's voice whispered, "Connection is understanding. Fear is choice." Ilara woke with a start. She knew he was right. Fear was natural. But curiosity, understanding, and careful study were the path forward. Kale's genome had reached out to her, forming a bond that was unprecedented in the history of life. And she had a responsibility to understand it fully, to guide it safely, and to discover what it could teach humanity. Returning to the lab the next morning, Ilara felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. The genome's connection with her own DNA was still present in the simulation. New sequences had appeared overnight, forming more intricate, responsive patterns. Kyle was already there, standing calmly near the observation deck. "You are ready," he said simply. Ilara studied him. "Ready? For what?" "To understand fully," Kyle replied. "To see how connection can lead to growth. To witness potential beyond your current limits." She nodded, understanding. This was no longer just research. It was a partnership between human and genome, observer and observed. Kale's DNA was alive, intelligent, and connecting with her in ways she could not have imagined, and the possibilities were both thrilling and terrifying. The day stretched ahead, full of simulations, calculations, and observations. Ilara felt her mind expanding, adapting to the patterns she had never encountered. Kyle's genome was teaching her not just about itself, but about life, evolution, and the untapped potential of humanity. By nightfall, she realized something extraordinary. The genome wasn't just responding, it was anticipating. It seemed to understand her intentions, her curiosity, and even her caution. For the first time, she felt as if she wasn't just a scientist observing a subject. She was part of a living, intelligent system that was teaching her, guiding her, and connecting with her in ways she could barely comprehend. And she knew one thing with absolute certainty. The journey had only begun. Kyle's DNA was a living mystery, a bridge to a future humanity had never imagined, and a teacher unlike any she had ever known. Ilara Voss stared at the glowing DNA simulation on the lab screen, her mind heavy with questions. Kyle's genome had been evolving, learning, and now connecting with her in ways she had never imagined. Every interaction revealed new layers of intelligence, adaptation, and possibility. But with every discovery, the weight of responsibility grew. She paced the lab, thinking aloud. If this genome can adapt, learn, and connect, what else could it do? Could it affect humans beyond Kale? Could it change humanity itself? Kale, standing near the observation deck, watched silently. His expression was calm, but there was a hint of understanding in his eyes. "Potential is not danger, Ilara," he said softly. "It is a choice. Knowledge is neutral. The use of knowledge determines outcome." Ilara sighed. He was right, of course. She had always known that science was a double-edged sword. Every breakthrough carried risks and rewards. But Kale's DNA was not ordinary science. It was alive, intelligent, and, she realized, capable of far more than she could safely predict. The team of scientists had gathered in the lab. They were eager to hear her report, but she hesitated. Could she explain what she had observed without inciting panic? Kale's genome was unlike anything humanity had encountered. The implications were both thrilling and frightening. She began carefully, showing the team the data and the unusual patterns in Kale's DNA. "These sequences," she explained, "adapt in real time. They respond to observation, environmental changes, and even to my own DNA. It is aware." The team exchanged nervous glances. Dr. Martin, her supervisor, frowned. "Aware? Are you suggesting this genome thinks?" Ilara nodded, trying to keep her voice steady. "Not in the way humans think. It doesn't have emotions or desires like we do, but it learns, adapts, and can form connections. It is intelligent in a way we've never seen before." Questions and concerns flooded the room. Could this genome be dangerous? Could it replicate or alter human DNA without control? Could it escape the lab and spread unpredictably? Ilara felt the pressure mounting. She had always prided herself on rational thinking, careful observation, and ethical responsibility. But now she faced a dilemma she had never imagined. Kale's genome offered a chance to understand life at a level humanity had never reached. But at what cost? That night, she stayed in the lab, reviewing the simulations and trying to think clearly. Kyle stood silently nearby, observing her. His presence was both comforting and unnerving, a constant reminder of the intelligence she was studying. "You are worried," Kale said softly. "Fear is natural. But you must remember, knowledge is a tool. It does not act without intention." Ilara rubbed her temples. Intention. That's what worries me. If this genome can interact with humans, adapt, and connect, how do we know it won't misuse that power? How do we know it won't do something unpredictable? Kale's eyes softened. It does not misuse. But humans must choose wisely. The future is shaped by those who act with understanding, not fear. Ilara nodded slowly, realizing that he was not just teaching her about his genome, he was teaching her about responsibility. Science without ethics could be dangerous, but science guided by careful judgment and understanding could change everything for the better. She decided to run a controlled experiment. Carefully, she created a simulated model of human DNA interacting with Kale's genome. The simulation showed how his sequences could integrate, enhance, and adapt without causing harm. It was astonishing. The genome could improve cellular repair, enhance cognitive function, and even strengthen immune responses. But the risks were clear. If the genome adapted too quickly or in an uncontrolled way, it could overwhelm the human system. Every advancement carried a potential for disaster. Ilara realized she faced a choice: continue the experiments and risk unpredictability, or halt the research and leave humanity unaware of the potential Kyle represented. She paced the lab, thinking about the consequences. She remembered her own DNA being mirrored in Kale's genome. That connection had shown her that the interaction could be intimate, even personal. She had felt it in subtle ways: responses in her own body, shifts in perception, a strange resonance with Kyle's presence. Could that happen to others? Could the genome form connections with humans in ways they could not control? The moral dilemma weighed heavily. Ilara knew that scientific curiosity was powerful, but it was not justification for recklessness. She needed guidance, a plan, and a way to balance the pursuit of knowledge with safety. Kyle approached her. "You do not need to act alone," he said. "I am here to guide, to assist, to ensure understanding. But the choice remains yours. Fear or understanding. Your decision shapes what happens next." Ilara nodded. She realized then that Kale was not just a subject. He was a partner, a collaborator, and a teacher. His genome offered knowledge, but knowledge required responsibility. She had to decide how far to go and how to protect humanity from unintended consequences. The next morning, she presented her findings to the station council. Carefully, she explained the adaptive nature of Kale's DNA, its potential for learning and connection, and the unprecedented opportunities it offered. She did not exaggerate, but she did not hide the risks. The council was divided. Some were eager to explore the possibilities, envisioning a future where humans could enhance themselves safely. Others feared the unknown, warning that any interaction with Kale's genome could be catastrophic. Ilara listened, weighing their arguments. She understood both perspectives. Fear was natural. Humanity had always feared what it did not understand. But progress required courage, careful judgment, and careful experimentation. After the meeting, she returned to the lab, exhausted but determined. Kyle was waiting, calm as always. "The council is uncertain," he said. "Do not let their fear stop understanding." Ilara shook her head. "I can't ignore their concerns, but I also can't ignore what I've seen. This genome, it's not just a discovery, it's a responsibility, and I have to find a way to guide it safely." Kale nodded. "Then you are ready. Understanding requires courage, but so does restraint. Knowledge without guidance can be dangerous. You must decide the balance." Over the next several days, Alara worked tirelessly. She created controlled simulations, testing how Kale's genome interacted with human DNA under strict conditions. She documented every observation, every adaptation, every connection. Each simulation revealed new capabilities, but also new risks. She found that the genome could enhance healing, improve cognitive processing, and even predict environmental changes. But she also discovered that without careful guidance, the adaptation could overwhelm human systems. The balance was delicate, and every experiment carried weighty consequences. Kyle remained at her side, observing, guiding, and sometimes demonstrating subtle interactions with his own DNA. He was patient, calm, and remarkably wise. Alara realized that she had not just a subject, but a teacher. Kale's genome was teaching her about life, evolution, and the responsibilities of knowledge. One night, exhausted and contemplative, Alara stood at the observation deck, staring at the stars. She thought about humanity, about the Council's fears, and about the potential Kyle represented. The genome could change everything, enhance life, extend understanding, and open doors humanity had never imagined. But it could also destroy if mishandled. Kyle appeared silently beside her. "The future is uncertain," he said softly. "But it is not predetermined. You have the choice to guide it, to shape it with care." Alara nodded, understanding the truth in his words. She had crossed a threshold. She was no longer just a scientist observing a subject. She was part of a process, a partnership, and a responsibility that could define humanity's future. Her fear had not vanished, but it had transformed into resolve. She would proceed carefully, ethically, and wisely. Kale's genome had revealed possibilities beyond imagination, but it was up to her to ensure that knowledge would be used for growth, not destruction. And in that moment, under the quiet light of distant stars, Alara made her choice. She would embrace understanding, guide the genome responsibly, and face the moral challenges ahead. The journey was far from over. The decisions she made now would shape the path of human evolution, the integration of intelligence beyond comprehension, and the partnership she had formed with Kyle. Alara took a deep breath. Fear would remain, it always did, but courage and responsibility would guide her. Humanity's future was uncertain, but she knew one thing: she would not shy away from the path of discovery. Kale's genome awaited her decisions, and together they would step into the unknown. The lab was quiet, filled only with the soft hum of the sequencers and the low whisper of the station's life support systems. Alara Voss stood at her workstation, staring at the complex patterns of Kale's DNA. The simulations from the past weeks had revealed more than she had dared hope or fear. The genome's intelligence was beyond human understanding, capable of learning, adapting, and even forming connections with human DNA. She reflected on the moral challenges she had faced. The Council had been divided, the risks clear, the potential enormous. But she had made her choice. Knowledge could not be ignored. Fear could not prevent progress. If humanity were to advance, it would require understanding, responsibility, and courage. Kale stood silently beside her, his expression calm, yet attentive. "You have thought carefully," he said softly. "You understand the responsibility. Are you ready to take the next step?" Alara nodded slowly. "I am. But we must proceed with care. One mistake, one uncontrolled adaptation, could be catastrophic. I won't risk humanity recklessly." Kale inclined his head. "Then you have learned the most important lesson. Knowledge is power, but wisdom is choice. Together, we can guide it safely." Alara returned to the sequencer, entering a new set of parameters. This time she was not merely observing. She was collaborating, creating a controlled environment where Kale's genome could interact safely with human DNA, exploring potential enhancements without danger. She introduced sequences designed to strengthen cellular repair, enhance memory, and improve immunity. Every simulation was monitored, every change measured. The genome responded quickly. It adapted, reshaped, and refined the sequences, integrating them with her input in ways that were elegant and precise. It was as if Kale's DNA understood her intentions, respected them, and worked with her to create solutions far beyond human capabilities. Ilara's heart raced. This was more than science. It was the creation of a new form of life understanding, a bridge between human potential and intelligence beyond their own biology. She realized that humanity's future had changed forever. Over the next several days, she carefully documented every adaptation, every interaction. Kale's genome began showing patterns that suggested predictive abilities, anticipating needs, strengthening systems before damage occurred, and optimizing interactions in ways she could barely comprehend. Each result was exciting, but she maintained strict control, ensuring that no experiment could go beyond the safe parameters she had established. One evening, she paused to consider the broader implications. If Kale's genome could enhance humans safely, it could usher in an era of unprecedented progress. Disease could be reduced, cognitive abilities could be strengthened, and human life could extend in ways previously thought impossible. The risks remained, but the potential outweighed them if handled responsibly. Kyle watched her quietly. "Do you see now?" he asked. "The connection we share is not just biological. It is understanding, cooperation. Fear no longer guides you." Ilara smiled faintly. "I see. But I also see the responsibility. This is bigger than me, bigger than the station. We have to ensure that this knowledge is used wisely." He nodded. "Then you are ready." The next simulation was the most ambitious yet. Ilara introduced a full model of a human genome interacting with Kale's adaptive sequences. She monitored every strand, every fold, every predictive change. The results were astonishing. The genome enhanced neural connections, optimized cellular repair, and created a system that could adapt to environmental and physical stressors almost instantly. Ilara felt awe mixed with pride. She had witnessed something extraordinary, a genome that could enhance life responsibly, guided by human judgment and ethical oversight. Kale's presence had not only facilitated the discoveries, but had taught her the importance of balance, restraint, and ethical responsibility. Days turned into weeks, and the project progressed steadily. The council, initially hesitant, began to understand the careful approach she had taken. Observing the simulations, they realized that Kale's genome could be a partner, not a threat, if managed with wisdom and control. Ilara continued to work closely with Kale. Their interactions became more intuitive, the connection between human and genome deepening. She discovered subtle enhancements in her own cognitive processing, slight increases in memory retention and awareness, likely influenced by her connection with Kale's sequences. She realized that the collaboration was not one-sided. She was learning, evolving, and growing alongside him. One night, as she reviewed the data, Kale spoke softly. "You have reached a point of understanding that few humans could. You see potential without fear. You respect responsibility without hesitation. This is the choice that shapes the future." Ilara nodded, absorbing his words. "It hasn't been easy," she admitted. "There were moments when I was terrified. But now, I understand. Knowledge without guidance is dangerous, but knowledge with care can change everything." Kale's gaze was steady, almost approving. "Then you have chosen wisely." The weeks passed, and the lab transformed into a hub of controlled experimentation. Ilara created detailed protocols. ensuring that every interaction between Kale's genome and human DNA was safe, predictable, and ethical. Every enhancement, every adaptation was carefully monitored. Eventually, the Council approved a limited program to study safe, reversible integration of adaptive sequences with volunteer subjects. The results were promising: enhanced healing rates, improved cognitive performance, and optimized immune responses, all achieved without risk or instability. Humanity had taken its first cautious step into a new frontier of biology. Ilara often reflected on the journey. What had begun as fear and uncertainty had transformed into knowledge, understanding, and hope. Kale's genome had challenged every assumption she had about life, intelligence, and evolution. It had shown her that potential was limitless, but only if approached with wisdom and care. She remembered the first time she had looked at his DNA, the moment she had felt terror. Now, that terror had been replaced with respect, curiosity, and determination. She had chosen to embrace understanding, to guide Kale's intelligence responsibly, and to ensure that humanity would benefit without harm. One morning, she stood at the observation deck, looking out at the stars. Kale was beside her, silent as always. The light of distant suns shimmered across the station's windows, a reminder of the vast universe and the possibilities it held. "You have done well," Kale said quietly. "Humanity's future is uncertain, but you have created a path forward. Knowledge, guided by understanding, will light the way." Ilara smiled, feeling a sense of accomplishment and purpose she had never known. "We've done well together," she said, "and the journey isn't over. There's still so much to learn, so much to discover." Kyle nodded. "And you will guide it wisely. That is the true choice." The lab was no longer a place of fear and uncertainty. It had become a place of discovery, collaboration, and hope. Humanity's first encounter with intelligence beyond its own biology had been guided by courage, careful thought, and ethical responsibility. And under Ilara's watchful eye, that knowledge would be nurtured, controlled, and shared in a way that ensured the future would be bright. Ilara returned to her workstation, reviewing the latest simulation results. The genome's adaptive patterns were stable, the connections with human DNA safe and predictable. Every enhancement, every modification had been carefully monitored, ensuring that the potential for growth was realized without risk. She looked at Kale, who stood quietly nearby, and felt a deep sense of gratitude. He had not only revealed the secrets of his DNA, but had taught her the value of responsibility, restraint, and understanding. Together, they had taken the first step into a future where humanity could reach new heights. The station hummed softly around them, a quiet testament to the possibilities of science guided by wisdom. Ilara felt a thrill of anticipation. The work ahead was enormous, but she was ready. She had chosen understanding over fear, collaboration over isolation, and wisdom over recklessness. As the stars stretched endlessly beyond the station's windows, Ilara realized that the journey of discovery was far from over. Kale's genome held secrets yet to be revealed, potential yet to be unlocked. But now she was not afraid. She had learned to balance curiosity with caution, knowledge with responsibility, and innovation with ethics. In that moment, humanity's future seemed boundless, filled with promise, guided by those who dared to understand, and illuminated by the light of cautious discovery. Ilara took a deep breath, her eyes returning to the glowing sequences on the screen. Kyle's DNA was alive, intelligent, and connected to her in ways she had never imagined. The terror of the first discovery had transformed into hope, determination, and purpose. And she knew, without a doubt, that humanity's first step into a new era had begun. The choice had been made, the path was clear, and the future was theirs to shape.